My son sold my car behind my back, and that was the moment I stopped playing nice. I was standing in my kitchen that morning, waiting for the kettle to whistle, when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my son Evan. I hit play, expecting the usual check-in or some "Mom, you really should" lecture. Instead, his voice came through smooth as butter. "Hey Mom, just wanted you to know I took care of the Buick. Sold it to Mason. You remember him from the church picnic? Anyway, it's all sorted. Love you." I froze. Sold it. He sold it. Not borrowed. Not serviced. Not moved. Sold. My car. My Harvey. My hands tightened around the edge of the countertop until my knuckles went stiff. The kettle shrieked behind me, but the only noise in my head was Evan's casual "love you," tossed in like seasoning over a burnt dish. I didn't scream. Didn't call him back. Didn't crumble. I just sat down at my kitchen table and let the silence pour into me like cold water. Because this wasn't new, not really. Evan had been slipping into the driver's seat of my life for years now. Quietly. Confidently. Without asking. It makes things simpler for you, Mom. Less clutter. I'm helping. Those words, his favorite tools. And I'd let him use them. He'd reorganized my attic last year. 2 boxes of my late husband's books disappeared. Then he replaced my favorite recliner because ergonomically it's outdated. And now Harvey. The car my husband taught me to drive in. The one we took on every summer road trip. The one that still smelled faintly of spearmint gum. He never even asked. I looked out the window toward the shed. No, the workshop. That's what Evan insisted on calling it. My husband built it himself, plank by plank, stubborn pride in every nail. Evan slowly took it over until even the tools inside seemed to answer to him. But he forgot one tiny detail. The shed? The land it sits on? The property? Every inch of it. Still legally mine. And for the first time in a long time, something inside me clicked back into place. If Evan could make decisions without me, he was about to learn I could make my own decisions too, ones he'd never see coming. He thought selling my car was bold. He hadn't seen bold yet. If he thought selling my car was crossing a line, he was about to learn I knew exactly where every line on this property was, and which ones I was ready to erase. The morning after the voicemail, I walked out to the shed, Evan's workshop, as he liked to brand it, like he owned stock in the place. I stood in the doorway, letting the cool Ohio wind brush past me as I surveyed everything inside. Tools. Shelves. His labeled boxes. His half-finished gadgets and weekend projects. All neatly arranged like he planned to colonize the space permanently. He never asked before taking over. He just moved in, slowly, quietly, like ivy crawling up a wall until you realize the whole building's covered. And I used to let him, because back then, I thought that was love. Helping. Bonding. Family. Funny how hindsight tightens the focus. My late husband, Mark, built that shed in '92 with nothing but reclaimed lumber, stubborn determination, and a badly tuned radio playing country songs. I still remember handing him nails while he cursed at the crooked frame. Now Evan treated it like an extension of his 2-story house across town. A weekend clubhouse he forgot wasn't his. But as I stood there that morning, something new sharpened inside me. Curiosity, not anger. What does he think is his? And what does he think I won't dare touch? The shed smelled like sawdust, old cedar, and the ghost of Mark's aftershave. I stepped inside, touched nothing, moved nothing, just looked. I needed to see the whole picture before I made a move. And oh, the picture was clear. Evan had forgotten something fundamental. I wasn't a tenant. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't a relic to be helped. This property, every board, nail, and square inch still belonged to me. I closed the door gently, like I was tucking away a secret, and walked back toward the house with a plan forming stronger than coffee. He didn't need to know yet. Let him keep assuming he held all the authority. Because the moment he sold Harvey without asking, he handed me permission, his own, without even realizing it. And I promise you this. He had no idea the kind of decision I was about to make next. Before I took a single step forward, I needed one thing. Someone who still saw me as capable. And trust me, I knew exactly who to call. I grabbed my phone that same afternoon and dialed Nancy Porter, my attorney of nearly a decade. She was the only person who didn't pat my hand when she talked to me. The only one who saw my age as a fact, not a disability. She answered on the second ring. "Morning, Linda. Everything okay?" "Depends," I said. "I'm thinking about selling a structure on my property." There was a pause on her end. I could practically hear her slip on her reading glasses. "A structure? You make it sound like a chicken coop." "It's the shed," I clarified. "Separate from the main house. It has its own foundation. Utilities. My husband built it." Another pause, longer this time, heavier. "And you own the land outright?" she asked. "Yes. Every inch. No mortgage, no liens, nothing tied up." "Well," she said, her voice shifting into that crisp professional tone I loved. "Then it's possible. I'll need to check zoning and parcel division, but we can make it happen. Is there a buyer?" "Not yet," I said. "For now, I'm just exploring." Nancy chuckled. "Exploring. That's what people say right before they do exactly what they've already decided." I didn't argue. She wasn't wrong. We scheduled a meeting for Monday. I hung up and stood there with the phone still warm in my hand. The kitchen felt different, bigger somehow, like I'd opened a window that had been nailed shut for years. I made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink. Just held it and listened to the hum of the refrigerator. I hadn't felt this steady in a long time. Later that evening, Evan called. "Hey, Mom," he said breezily. "Just checking in. Everything good?" "Fine," I said. "You got the message about the Buick?" "I did." "Great," he said, sounding relieved. "I figured it was time. You haven't driven in months." "That's true," I said lightly. Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. The silence stretched just long enough for him to sense something off. "You're not mad, right?" I could have told him right then. Could have said, "No, Evan. I'm not angry, I'm planning." But that would have spoiled the lesson he didn't even know he was about to get. "No," I said simply. "I'm not mad." He exhaled like he'd dodged a bullet. Good. Let him think that. I hung up first. If he thought calm meant harmless, he was about to learn how wrong he was. By Monday morning, I wasn't second-guessing anything. I was ready. And when I walked into Nancy's office, I knew this wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of a shift Evan never saw coming. Nancy's office sat between a bakery and an old shoe repair shop. Nothing fancy, no marble floors or glass walls, just a quiet place where real decisions got made. She already had my property maps printed when I walked in. "Linda," she said with a smile. "You look lighter than last time." "Maybe I am." She slid the papers toward me. I reviewed the parcel zoning. "You can subdivide the shed from the main home if you want to. It'll take a surveyor, utility separation, and a few forms, but legally, it's clean." My heart thumped, not from fear, from clarity. "And the sale?" I asked. "We can list it under whatever name you want for privacy, or sell directly if someone's interested." I leaned back in the chair. "I want it done quietly," I said. "No family involvement. No explanation saúde." Nancy's eyes flicked up knowingly. "So this is about Evan." "It's about me," I corrected, "and about finally making a decision with my own name on it." She didn't press. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. We went over signatures, timelines, the steps needed. Every detail made the air feel sharper, cleaner, like I was finally opening a window in my life that had been stuck shut for years. When I left her office, the afternoon sun felt warmer than usual. Evan didn't call that day. Didn't text. But I wasn't surprised. He always checked in after he made a decision for me, not before. He assumed silence meant agreement. He hadn't learned yet that my silence had changed. That evening, I walked into the shed again. But this time, I didn't look at it the way he did, as a workshop, a convenience, an extension of his confidence. I looked at it the way Mark once had, something honest, built with intention. Something that deserved a purpose chosen, not claimed. Evan's tools were lined up like soldiers on the pegboard. His expensive drill sat on the counter. A stack of extension cords coiled like lazy snakes in the corner. For the first time in months, I didn't feel pushed out. I felt in control. My fingers brushed the old wooden frame of the door on the way out. "Don't worry, Mark," I whispered. I'm not letting it end up in the wrong hands. Because if Evan could make decisions without me, I could make decisions without him. And trust me, what came next wasn't revenge. It was revelation. The call that changed everything came on an ordinary Thursday. Proof that life-altering moments don't always announce themselves. Sometimes they slide in quiet, like a key turning in a lock you forgot existed. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my notepad, jotting down memories, things I hadn't thought about in years, when my phone rang. Nancy's name appeared on the screen. "We've got a buyer," she said when I answered. "A retired carpenter named Dean Keller. 68. Lives 2 towns over. He saw the structure specs and loves the craftsmanship." My heartbeat quickened. Mark would have liked that detail. He always wanted someone who respected the work to own it someday. "He's offering 20% over the estimated value," Nancy added. "Wants a quiet space to tinker. Says the build reminds him of his dad's old shop." I didn't hesitate. "Accept it." "You don't want to meet him first?" she asked gently. "No," I said. "Just handle the closing." She paused long enough for me to sense she understood the weight of my choice. "All right," she said. "I'll process the paperwork." When we hung up, I sat there gripping the edges of my notepad. Not shaking, steady. Firm. The shed, Evan's workshop, was practically sold. Not out of spite. Out of reclamation. That night, I opened my bedroom windows and let the early autumn cold roll in. The breeze carried the scent of leaves and something else. Freedom, maybe. Or simply the absence of someone else's decisions weighing on my chest. The next morning, Evan stopped by unannounced. Of course he did. He let himself in as always, calling. "Hey Mom. Brought those multivitamins you like." "They give me headaches," I said, still facing the sink. He hesitated. "Oh well, okay." Then after a beat, "Mind if I use the shed? I left something out there last week." "Go ahead." He walked toward the back door with that familiar confidence, like he owned the ground he stepped on. I stayed in the kitchen listening. Door open. Door shut. Silence. Then footsteps returning. Clipped. Uneasy. "You reorganized," he said, standing in the doorway. "I didn't touch anything. Some things aren't where I left them." I shrugged. "Could have been time," I murmured. "Things shift." He looked at me too long. As if suddenly realizing I wasn't giving him answers he could shape or interpret the way he wanted. "Well, okay," he finally muttered. "I'll come by this weekend. Maybe bring the kids." "Let me know beforehand," I said. He didn't like that. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened. He heard the boundary clearly. And for once, he didn't push it. But he still had no idea the shed was already spoken for, and the clock was ticking. The day the buyer arrived, I realized something important. You can reclaim your life without raising your voice. Sometimes all it takes is a signature. Dean Keller pulled into my driveway in an old, dented pickup that looked older than half the people on my street. He stepped out wearing a flannel shirt, worn jeans, and work boots that had clearly seen real labor. Not the weekend projects Evan liked to brag about. Dean moved with the slow, steady confidence of a man who didn't need to impress anybody. He walked straight to the shed and ran his hand along the frame like he was greeting an old friend. "Solid work," he said softly. "This kind of craftsmanship, you don't see it anymore." I felt something warm in my chest. Mark would have liked him. Nancy joined us with a neat folder of paperwork. We stood in my kitchen while she walked us through signatures, dates, legalities. Dean didn't haggle. Didn't complicate anything. He simply nodded when needed, signed cleanly, and thanked me when it was done. When he turned to leave, he paused at the doorway. "May I ask something?" he said. "Of course." "Why sell something built this well?" I looked out the window at the pecan tree in the yard, watching the sunlight scatter through its branches like it always had. "Because it wasn't being treated like it belonged to me anymore," I said. "So I'm giving it to someone who knows how to treat things right." Dean nodded once, deep, respectful, and didn't ask another question. That was the thing about him. He understood without needing the whole story. The next morning, the money was in my account. More than I expected. Enough to matter, but not enough to distract me. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Instead, I stood at the back window, watching the shed. His shed now, quiet and still in the morning light. Evan had no idea anything had changed. No clue that the building he treated like his personal warehouse had a new owner. No idea that every tool, every box, every little piece of equipment inside would soon need to move. I took a deep breath. Not satisfaction. Not vengeance. Just clarity. Because for the first time in a long, long while, my life felt like it belonged to me again. And Evan could feel a shift coming. He just didn't know what it was yet. But he was about to find out the hard way, starting the moment his key stopped working. The moment his key didn't turn, I watched the truth hit him. For the first time, something on this property wasn't his to access. I was pouring tea in the kitchen when I heard the little metallic rattle outside. The unmistakable sound of Evan trying the shed door. Once. Twice. A third time, slower, like maybe the lock just needed convincing. From my window, I watched him lean in, jiggle the handle again, step back with confusion written all over his face. His key had always worked before. Because before the shed had been his playground, his tools, his projects, his assumed territory. Not anymore. He rattled it harder this time. The lock didn't budge. I saw the exact second frustration crawled up his spine. His posture straightened, then stiffened. And finally he walked toward the house. He didn't storm. He didn't shout. He walked the way a man walks when the ground under his feet shifts, and he's not sure where to step next. He opened the back door and stood in the doorway. "Mom," he said, his voice flatter than usual. "Did you change the lock on the shed?" I took a slow sip of my tea. "No," I said. "I didn't change anything." His brows drew together. "Well, my key doesn't work." "I imagine it wouldn't," I said calmly. His confusion flickered into something sharper. "Why wouldn't it work?" I set my cup down, folded my hands, met his eyes with the steadiness I'd been practicing for months. "Because it's not your shed anymore." The silence after that felt heavy enough to tilt the earth. He blinked. "What do you mean it's not my shed anymore?" "I sold it," I said plainly. It was like watching a glass fall in slow motion. His face cracking, shock breaking across it piece by piece. "You sold it?" His voice pitched upward. "To who?" "A man who paid for it." He stared at me like he couldn't tell if I was joking or having some late-life breakdown. "Mom, you can't just sell my workshop." "It was never your workshop," I said. "You treated it like it was. But you never asked." His jaw tightened. "You never said anything was wrong." "And you never believed anything could be," I replied. He started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "All my stuff is in there. My tools. They'll be returned," I said. "Dean agreed to give you time to remove them. But after next week, you'll need his permission to step foot inside." That stopped him cold. "His permission?" he repeated. "Yes. That's how ownership works." Something in his expression broke. Not anger, not rage, something closer to realization. He finally understood. I wasn't asking for respect anymore. I had taken it. But what he said next. That was the moment everything between us truly shifted. When he finally spoke, it wasn't anger that hit me. It was something heavier, something I never expected to hear from my own son. Evan stood there in my kitchen, chest rising and falling too fast, like the room had shrunk around him. For a moment, he didn't look like the confident man who always had a plan. He looked like the boy who used to cling to my sleeve on the first day of school. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked, his voice strained. "Why now?" I took a breath that felt like it had been waiting years to leave my lungs. "Because I needed to remember who I am." He shook his head like my words didn't fit his version of reality. "I was only trying to help." "No," I said. "You were trying to control things you didn't own." His jaw worked as he tried to form a rebuttal, but the fight drained from him. He dropped into a chair and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, palms pressed together. I can't believe you'd do this without telling me first." I practically laughed. Soft, but real. "You didn't tell me when you sold my car, Evan." He winced. "That was different." "It wasn't," I said quietly. "It was the same. You made a decision that wasn't yours because you assumed I wouldn't question it." He looked up at me then, eyes tired, uncertain, cracked open in a way I'd never seen. I didn't realize, he whispered. I didn't realize I was making you feel small. His voice stumbled on that last word. Small. That's exactly what I had been feeling. Pushed aside. Shrunken down into the easiest version of myself. The one that didn't argue. The one that didn't inconvenience anyone. I know, I said. You didn't realize because you weren't looking. He let out a shaky breath and rubbed his forehead with both hands. So what now? He asked softly. Are we just done? The question struck deeper than he intended. No, I said. We're not done. But things won't go back to the way they were. Silence settled again. This time not sharp, but honest. He nodded slowly, like he was absorbing a truth that didn't feel comfortable, but did feel deserved. I want to fix it, he said. I don't know how, but I want to start. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first real step he'd taken toward me in a long, long time. I wasn't ready to reach back yet, but I didn't shut the door either. And just when I thought the conversation was over, he returned the next day, with something in his hand that changed everything again. The next morning, when he knocked, really knocked, I knew something had shifted in him. And in me. It was early, maybe just after 8. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice your own heartbeat. 3 gentle knocks tapped at the door. Not the careless way he used to push it open. Not the half knock he gave when he assumed permission. A real knock. I opened the door. Evan stood there holding a small white envelope, his jacket unzipped, hair still messy from sleep. For once, he didn't walk past me into the house. He waited. Can I come in? He asked. You already are, I said, stepping aside. We sat in the living room, sunlight soft through my curtains, steam rising from my mug. He kept the envelope in his hands, turning it over with his thumbs like he wasn't sure if he deserved to give it to me. I went through the old family albums last night, he said quietly. Sophie brought them over. I didn't interrupt. I saw a photo of you, he continued, holding me after I got sick in 5th grade. You looked exhausted but proud. I forgot you had a life before I came along. That you weren't always someone to protect. He looked at me, really looked at me. I'm not here to fix anything, he said. I'm just here to show you I heard you. Then he finally held out the envelope. I made some changes, he said softly. Legal ones. I removed myself from anything involving your estate. Gave Sophie responsibility where it belongs. I shouldn't have had that control. I opened the envelope only after he left. Inside was a notarized document, exactly as he said, and a short handwritten note. I see you now, Mom. Not as someone to manage. As someone I'm learning to know again. I folded it and placed it next to my birth certificate. Documents of identity, all of them. Later that afternoon, I stood in the shed, the corner I'd cleared for myself, sunlight hitting the chair just right. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It was reclamation. It was peace. I realized then. You don't return to who you were. You become who you were supposed to be all along. If this journey hit home for you, even just a little, drop a comment telling me which moment shocked you the most. Share this with someone who needs to reclaim their power too. And stay tuned. More powerful real-life stories like this are coming. We begin again. Always.